Okay, the extract I'm going to read is from set in the year 1970. Obviously you've got David, who's the lead character, Melody, his wife, Nathaniel and Saul, who are part of the band, and a character called Susie, who was his first girlfriend. Truly Blue were back on top, confirmed by their last minute to the third Isle of Wight festival. The band were ecstatic. The press pretended it never suggested otherwise. Nathaniel was raking it in, and even Melody began to sweeten again. Only David was unhappy. Although he concealed it well from the others, his escalating dependence on drink and drugs was beginning to have a significantly adverse effect upon him. It was taking more and more of everything to achieve the same effect. In fact, it was taking a hefty daily dose just to feel normal anymore. Although his income had improved, the substances that he was buying in bulk, plus Melody's compulsive spending, left him perilously in debt most of the time. But he had a lifestyle, an image, all bigger, brighter and larger than life to maintain, if nothing else than to hide the increasingly empty existence beneath. He was shackled to a loveless partner, beginning to suffer from a range of physical ailments as his body struggled to cope with the abuse, and his mind, fragile at the best of times, was subject to increasing anxiety, depression, blackouts and occasionally terrifying hallucination. The madcap laughs? He couldn't even raise a smile. He felt isolated, afraid and very alone. Although he was very rarely actually on his own. When he wasn't working, he sought to escape himself by behaving badly at a plethora of West End clubs, with an ever-increasing crowd of equally delinquent friends. Although usually drunk, occasionally disruptive, and sometimes destructive, he was a lucrative celebrity attraction, and the clubs welcomed him warmly at all hours of the day or night. And so he lurched from one to the other in an endless chaotic carousel, trying to convince everybody, especially himself, that he was having the time of his life. He had learned long ago to develop his idiocy to hide his inadequacy. Now he was also able to mask his weirdness behind the dazzling glare of fame. Although appearances suggested otherwise, he did not always enjoy his excessive escapades, especially the inevitable come-downs and hangovers. But, he believed, anything was better than having to study himself sober in the cold light of day. His reputation deepened daily, but since his behaviour was not yet affecting his playing, and Nathaniel continued to encourage the publicity, he just spiralled on and on and on. So long as he kept the money coming in, neither Truly Blue, Melody or anybody else seemed to care. He was delighted with Melody running out of stunts to stay in the limelight, especially compared to her hyper-husband, finally produced a son. A beautiful baby boy with his father's deep blue eyes. Melody named him Connor, and as soon as the first photo shoots were done, she handed him over to a nanny for safekeeping. David, having had the benefit of loving, if now lost, childhood, wasn't happy about this arrangement, but he was barely capable of looking after himself, let alone a baby. His old friend Rich was in touch straight away. "Congratulations, mate," his nasal tones rang down the telephone. David was heartened to hear the familiar voice. "Listen," Rich went on, "I wonder if we could meet up sometime, wet the baby's head maybe?" David was delighted. "Course, mate," he enthused, "any time." There was only the slightest pause at the other end of the line. "How about tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, at JJ's club, for old time's sake?" David was a little taken aback, but very pleased all the same. "Oh, good idea, I'll see you there." Word spread, and as the taxi drew up to David's old club and he stepped out, he was greeted like a homecoming hero. By this time he was used to the adulation of strangers, but this was different. These were his friends. For the first time in a long time he felt loved. After a while he was left in peace to talk to his old partner in crime. Almost immediately Rich launched into an urgent appeal. He leaned forward and looked straight into David's eyes. "David, mate," he gabbled, "I'm in real trouble. You've got to help me." David was concerned. "Of course, what's up?" Rich's eyes darted around nervously before replying. "I owe some real bad people a real lot of money, at the casinos," he explained in hushed tones. David frowned. "Who? How much?" A short pause. 15,000 quid. David's eyes widened. "How much?" he said at full volume. Rich hushed him anxiously. "You heard me," he said. David was confused. "But you've never been a betting man," he said. "You've got a lot of vices, I'll give you that, but gambling wasn't one of them." A strange look crossed Rich's ugly features. Are you calling me a liar? He said, suddenly full of hostility. No, David assured him, but you weren't ever. Look, things change. Now, are you going to help me, or what? Of course, there was no hesitation. What can I do? Now it was Richie's turn to look incredulous. Well, he faltered, his stride momentarily broken. I need money. Lots of it, and I need it soon. David's face fell. Despite the carefully constructed appearance of a pop star lifestyle, he had in reality hardly the proverbial pot to pee in. What could he say, he wondered. Well, the thing is, he began. Richie's face suddenly darkened. You won't help me? He hissed through clenched teeth. I would if I could, but... If you could, Rich said loudly, suddenly seeming to forget the need for privacy. But you're the great David Stadman, millionaire superstar. Richie, David implored him, it's not as simple as that. Helping an old friend? What could be more simple than that? Of course you could, but you won't. Richie pushed back his chair and people stared. Not important enough for you anymore, is that it? He shouted. Well, let me tell you something. You'll regret the day you let me down. Rich, Dave called desperately, but his old friend had stormed off. And for once, David Stadman did not welcome being the centre of everyone's attention. It took less than 48 hours for the story to hit the paper. Stadman, the schoolgirl in their secret shame. The article went on to detail the story of David's relationship with Susie, including the subsequent abortion. He was mortified. Reports of drunken cavorting were one thing. This was something else entirely. What would poor Susie, wherever she was now, make of this? His heart bled. And how could one of his oldest friends sell him out in such a way? You bought it on yourself. I told you I needed the money, was all Rich said before hanging up, cutting off the communication forever. Yet another anchor to the grounding of his past was lost. David pondered over the papers. First Brian Jones, then Jimi Hendrix, and now Janis Joplin. It seemed to be open season on rock stars. Where would it all end? He didn't like to think. Saul started to worry about him. He mentioned his concerns to Nathaniel. Nathaniel shrugged. It's just how he is, he said simply. From what I can gather, he's always been a bit of a loony. Certainly has since I first met him that night at JJ's. Saul laughed. Doesn't that seem a long time ago now? Lifetime, Nathaniel agreed. Look, don't worry about David. You can't change him, and we wouldn't want to anyway, would we? You're a great songwriter, Saul, but we both know that Truly Blue wouldn't be half as famous without that voice, those eyes, and that idiocy. But Saul wasn't as gullible as his handsome bandmate. He understood Nathaniel better and played expertly to his priorities. You ever heard the story of the golden goose? He asked dryly. Nathaniel just smiled. I prefer to think of it in terms of the golden goat. Nothing lasts forever, Saul. Milk it while you can.